Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our LA Multifamily Meetup. This is a really exciting session because I don't know if you all are aware, but it's our 100th session. We've been doing this for many years now. Will Tiao has been an amazing partner to collaborate with and to bring in education for anyone who's interested in learning more about how to invest in multifamily, how to build wealth through real estate. We're so excited that we've been able to do this for so long. And today's our 100th session, and we have the LA County Assessor here with us. How perfect is that? So welcome, everybody. I'm Anthony Vulin. I'm the owner of the collective, and our mission is creating paths to wealth through real estate. So education is something that we're always very, very passionate about. All of our sessions are recorded and are on our YouTube page, so we invite you to check that out. Just search the Collective Realty on YouTube, and you could see a lot of our past sessions that are on there. Next month, we have a special event that we do once a year. We do a home buyer fair, and at the home buyer fair, it's a carnival theme. So it's free and it's open to everyone. You can come in and meet all different types of vendors in the real estate industry, have free fair food like funnel cakes and cotton candy and popcorn and corn dogs. We even have a pie eating contest. And then, of course, we have education inside the office all day. They're brief 15 to 20-minute seminars that happen all day. And this is going to be on October 15th. So we really, really look forward to seeing you guys there. Spread the word. I'll put the RSVP link in the chat, but it's WeHoFallCarnival.com. And that will be our session for our October meetings. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Will Tiao, who's our commercial director and my partner. Will, congrats, we made it 100 sessions. This is awesome. Let's just get right in. We have two great speakers today. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, and Will will introduce our second speaker. Our first speaker today is Jeffrey Prang, our LA County Assessor. And he's the LA County Assessor. He was elected in 2014 as the 27th Assessor for the County of Los Angeles and re-elected in 2018 and again in 2022. Our realtor associations have always been behind him, and he's done a really great job. He was raised in Warren, Michigan. Assessor Prang is a graduate of Michigan State University, and after graduating, Mr. Prang relocated to California, where he served nearly 18 years as a council member for the city of West Hollywood, including 4 terms as mayor, among many other positions in the public sector. So he's close to my heart. I'm a WeHo boy. Upon taking office in 2014 as the Los Angeles County Assessor, Mr. Prang implemented sweeping reforms to ensure that the strictest ethical guidelines rooted in fairness, accuracy, and integrity would be adhered to in his office. Assessor Prang is a State Board of Equalization licensed appraiser and administrates the largest office of its kind in the nation, with 1,400 employees that provide the foundation for a property tax system that generates over $19 billion annually. Welcome, Mr. Prang, our LA County Assessor. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I'm consider myself very lucky to have friends and partners like you in the collective, and look forward to keeping this relationship going as we continue to strive to bring you and the entire profession needed resources and information that benefits the residents of LA County. So this will be a brief presentation because I know you have a full agenda after this meeting. I'm joined today by a couple of my staff members. Robert Izozaki is the Special Assistant in my Office for Constituent Services. I asked him to be here because you may ask some really hard questions that Robert is a specialist and he may be better qualified to answer. I also have Anne Marie Williams, who helped put this meeting together. There's frequently a lot of confusion as to what my office is, what it does, and what it doesn't do. And I always like to begin by talking about what I don't do, because the thing that I don't do is the thing that most people think that I do. I don't collect taxes. I'm not the tax assessor. There's another guy who collects taxes. He has a very intuitive title. He's called the tax collector. So my job is to assess the value of properties. Somebody else is in charge of of sending out bills and collecting the payments. All joking aside, as assessor of LA County, I am one of 3 countywide elected officials. The other 2 are much better known than me, and that's the sheriff and the district attorney. As Anthony said, I administer a department of about 1,400 employees in 6 different offices throughout the county. We're the largest local property assessment agency in the United States. We're responsible for valuing over 2.5 million taxable real property parcels and business assessments, which this year were valued at just over $1.997 trillion. That's with a T. Assessor plays a pretty vital role in local government financing, even though we are not technically a revenue department. But the truth is that no other government agency can do their job until I've done mine. If I don't do my job well and thoroughly, then other agencies may not have the revenues that they're entitled to. The valuation of county property is extremely important because it generates property tax revenues for local governments, school districts, special districts, and pay for vital public services from roads to hospitals to police, fire, libraries, etc. There are essentially 2 types of property which are taxable. One is real property, which is the business you're in. It includes land and its improvements. The other thing, type of property that we value is what's called business personal property, which includes furniture, equipment, and machinery, although it also includes airplanes, both commercial and general aviation aircraft, mobile homes, boats, and believe it or not, even racehorses. The primary job of my office is the production of what we call the annual assessment roll, which is essentially the inventory of all property in the county. The assessment roll serves a number of functions. Obviously, it's the foundation for the property tax system, but it's also a crucial planning document for local governments in their budgeting process, helping them to prepare for anticipated revenues from property taxes. And also, it serves as an important economic indicator for the real estate market. We work on a fiscal year and from July 1st to June 30th. So the 2022-2023 roll was just wrapped up a couple of months ago. I'm pleased to announce that the assessment roll has increased by almost 6% over last year. That marks the 13th consecutive year of uninterrupted property growth in LA County. And as I indicated, it will generate about $2 trillion in assessed value and contribute about $24 billion in property taxes to support vital public services. Now that I've given you a bit of an overview of the office, let me talk briefly about Proposition 13, which is the constitutional provision which governs how I do my job. It governs all property assessment practices. Under Prop 13, when you make a purchase of property, we establish its tax base. The tax base is the market value at the time of sale. Usually, the market value and the sales price are the same thing, but not always. It's not an arm's length transaction. If you get a good deal, you may see that your purchase price is less than your actual assessed value. This assessed value stays with you as long as you own the property. It is subject to a maximum of a 2% annual increase. It will never go higher than 2%. This standardized this stabilization and standard increase mean that there's a level of predictability that property owners can expect in their property values and taxes each year. This is sometimes called Prop 13 protection, although it bears mentioning that every single piece of property in the state of California is under Prop 13. It just depends on what you bought, when you bought it, about how good of a value that is. Nonetheless, that property value protection may no longer apply when there's a change in ownership or when there's new construction, such as adding an ADU, bedrooms, bathrooms, etc. When such events occur, the property can become subject to reassessment and your taxes may go up. These guidelines are applicable to all types of property, from single-family homes, multifamily residences, and commercial and industrial buildings. When it comes to multifamily residential properties or other types of income properties, there are a few things to consider. First, upon purchasing a multifamily resident, we will likely establish its tax base using either the market-based approach or the income approach to valuation. The comparable sales approach involves reviewing the sales price of similar properties in the surrounding areas. But if there are not similar properties, we will more likely rely on the income approach to value. If you later plan to add an additional unit or structure, such as an ADU, we will regard an addition as a reappraisable new construction event. First, it's important to note that when new construction occurs, we don't reassess the entire property for its market value in the neighborhood. Instead, we just determine the cost using standardized cost models to build an addition or ADU or whatever improvement that you're making using that approach. This will then be added to the underlying existing assessment for the property. It's important to note, though, that the costs used by our appraisers are based on regional cost manuals and may not actually reflect the actual cost of what you pay for that construction project. And obviously, if you have any questions about specific projects, you can certainly contact our appraisal team, which specialize in transfer and new construction appraisals. And this is easy to reach through our website. Another issue that I know has been of interest to realtors for the last couple of years is Proposition 19. This was a ballot measure that was sponsored back in 2020 by the California Association of Realtors. Prop 19, as a refresher, does two primary things. The first part of Prop 19 allows homeowners who are over 55, severely disabled, or the victim of a natural disaster to transfer their property tax base with them when they sell their home and buy a new one. This component also expands the benefits that previously existed before Prop 19, and it now allows a qualified homeowner to buy a home anywhere in the state. You could transfer the tax base up to 3 times, and allows you to transfer that tax base to a home of any value. The second component refers to transfer between family members or inheritance benefits, specifically between parents and children and grandparents and grandchildren. This component of the law applies to everybody and places new and severe restrictions on the transfer of property tax bases between family members. So in order to qualify for this exclusion and to avoid a complete reassessment of your property, a few things have to occur. Under Prop 19, the only property that your children, and in some cases grandchildren, can inherit with your existing property tax base is your primary residence, the home that you live in. No other property now qualifies. Under the old law, your kids could inherit your property plus $1 million in additional property. That's no longer the case. It now only affects your primary residence. Secondly, for them to qualify, they have to agree to occupy that residence within 1 year of the transfer, and they have to file the homeowner's exemption to attest that that is where they live. And the third part of Prop 19 is it puts a limit on the value of the primary residence and the tax base that your children or grandchildren can inherit. Generally speaking, if your home is worth less than $1 million, your kids can inherit that property and there'll be no reassessment. But if that property exceeds $1 million, there will be a new tax base. And it'll be a blended rate made up of the inherited portion under $1 million and a market rate over $1 million. In LA County, where the median sales price of a single family home is approaching $1 million and is well over $1 million in 50 different communities, this part of Prop 19 is likely means that most inheritances will involve a increase in property taxes. A few miscellaneous things I want to bring up because these always seem to come up when I speak to realtors. One of them deals with the death of a property owner. I did want to emphasize that it's very important that you let us know when you die. But the law says that when a property owner dies, the estate or the heirs are required to file a form with my office within 150 days of that death. It's called a change in ownership, death of real property owner form. Failure to do so could complicate inheritance, especially if you want to take advantage of the parent-to-child transfer program in Prop 19. I get a lot of questions about when does your property get reassessed. And generally speaking, you don't get reassessed except when you do new construction or a change in ownership. And a change in ownership could mean something as simple as adding or deleting a name from a deed. There's only a few people. There's only a few types of individuals that you can transfer, add or delete from a deed without reassessment. Typically speaking, that's a spouse or a child. Anyone else is going to result in a reassessment. Typically, if you're doing remodels, a kitchen remodel, roof remodel, bathroom remodels, those are typically not reassessed events. Reassessment for new construction usually means the addition of square footage. And then other question that comes up a great deal deals with building plans and maps. Which oftentimes we'll hear from folks. They'll say they looked at our assessment records, and it'll say that it's a 4-bedroom house with 3,000 square feet, but the city's building and safety department says it's 2,000 square feet with 3 bedrooms. And whose do we believe? The city's records are always the legal records. My records indicate what is actually there on the property. We don't opine on whether what's there is legal or not. So if there is a discrepancy, that usually means it's unpermitted construction, and the city would be within its rights to tell you to remove or legalize any additions. Couple last couple notes before I sign off. My office just recently launched a new program we call anti-fraud program we call e-notification. As you probably heard, it's become a more and more common occurrence where scurrilous individuals are attempting to record, steal property by recording deeds and other instruments against a property. This new e-notification program allows a property to record their email address with our office. And anytime somebody attempts to record something against your property, whether it be a grant deed, a lien, a deed of trust, you will receive an email notice within 48 hours indicating that this is taking place. That will give you the opportunity to determine whether or not that's something that should be happening. The old system required that you wait for 30 to 45 days to get a letter in the mail from the registrar recorder, and in the case of fraud, that may be too late. It's really easy to register by email. I think that we're putting something in the chat bar, and there's a registration link on the front page of our website at assessor.lacounty.gov. And one last thing I want to mention, we work very, very closely in the assessor's office with real estate professionals such as you. Because of that, we recognize that we have a lot of information that'll help you be a better informed professional and give you tools and information to share with your clients. We have a special site on our page designed exclusively for realtors. A lot of helpful information, tools, and other things that you might want to share with your clients, and hopefully make you look like a better prepared professional who is worthy of their business. I encourage you to bookmark that page and subscribe to our realtor newsletter, which we send out once a month with all types of helpful tips for property owners in LA County. So that pretty much concludes the things I wanted to talk about today, Anthony. I appreciate the invitation to be here. All my contact information is both on the chat bar as well as here in front of you. I'm happy to answer questions if that's appropriate, but thank you for your time and consideration. It's great to be able to visit with you this evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Will now to see if Will has any questions that he would like to start with. And if we have time, we can open it up to anyone else here who may have a question. So go ahead, Will.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Assessor Prang, for the presentation, and thanks to your staff for arranging this. So I just attended a panel earlier today on ADUs, which is probably the top question that most realtors are getting nowadays is about ADUs and what possibilities you have to do on there. How is your office looking at assessing? You mentioned that you would have a reassessment for any new construction. So how exactly is your office looking at different ADUs, and what are the metrics that you're using in terms of your reassessments?
So an ADU doesn't create anything new or different in our office in the way that we approach new construction. We will get permits from the city indicating that new construction is taking place. We'll evaluate the cost, typically using the cost methodology, and then we will add that additional value to your underlying assessment. An ADU, adding an ADU is no different than adding a pool or enclosing a porch or adding a second story. It's just all a matter of square footage, quality, and materials, the usual ingredients.
Okay, thank you.
There is, as you know, a new law that's kind of adjacent to that, Senate Bill 9,
Yes.
which now allows any, it pretty much eliminated single-family zoning in California, allows any qualified single-family lot to either divide that lot and build up to 2 units on each lot, or take your single-family home and divide it into a duplex, and to do so by right. One thing to keep in mind is if you divide your lot, there will be an impact on your property taxes. There's a lot of taxes that are done on a per parcel basis. Some of them are done on a square footage or value basis. But because of those that are on a per parcel basis, the single lot divided into 2 will likely have a net increase over all of the various assessments and taxes associated with it.
And then I have a follow-up. Thank you for that. I have a follow-up question because we have a subspecialty in tenants in common, and we're starting to see more multifamily properties being sold as tenants in common. And I know that there's a standard where if there's more than 50% change in ownership, that there's a reassessment. Oftentimes you have 3, 4, or more units that are being sold in a TIC. At which point would change in ownership cause a reassessment in any of these terms?
Well, thank you for that question. That is one of the reasons I asked Robert Izazaki from my staff to join us. This is his area of specialization, so I will let Robert take it from here.
Yeah, sure. So whenever there's any type of transfer of an interest in property, whether it's a partial interest or an entire interest in a given parcel, we'll reassess based on that. And so if there's an undivided interest, we'll revalue the entire property, and then for that portion that was transferred, we'll apply that the new value to that particular portion. The rest of the property that did not change ownership, it'll retain its existing tax base. So that 100% reassessment won't be placed on the entire property just because one of the co-tenants has moved.
Got it. Very good. Very good. Well, so it looks like we have a hand up. We have Stephanie Regal, who's an excellent architect. I know she has probably very good questions for you.
Oh, thanks. Well, real quick, first of all, thank you for setting this up. Appreciate it. We certainly work with assessors, with our clients. My first question was a follow-up just on that assessment of ADUs. I just wanted to clarify, are you using kind of the same cost per square foot or models as a home? I just wanted to clarify, are you kind of seeing it as kind of like for like, just like a home? I just wanted to clarify that, just like more square footage, or is it somehow differently modeled?
We use standard. So, well, typically it's a little bit, it can be a little bit different, because typically when we're valuing the sale of a home, we're using comparable sales. When you're doing additions, we will usually use the cost methodology, and we use regional cost manuals, Marshall and Swift, and things of that nature. We'll obviously look at the actual cost that you incur in that addition. It is, although it is feasible that the final cost estimate that we establish might be different than what you actually paid, since we're not using originally your actual cost, but we were using these regional cost barometers.
Right, but the same barometer as
Yes,
home, kind of. Yeah, it's not like substandard or something else. I think initially it was like a pool or something you'd throw on or something. Now it's seen as like for like construction is sort of what you're. Yeah. Okay.
So,
and then
so standardization and uniformity and appraisal is is the way we approach our job.
Okay. And then my second question or really quick is just about the sort of things that are unpermitted that are found. And if you have any update on kind of how, and sorry if I might have missed this, I did come in late. So if how you work with do or don't work with LADBS in terms of information. It's our experience that obviously you do a permit, there's a set of drawings that goes to the assessor's office for you to reassess and bring that new additional property tax. Is there any, I guess, is there any new back and forth either to help when things are unpermitted, or just if you could have any clarity on your sort of connection to building and safety? Is there any new processes or interconnectedness other than you receiving drawings once they're completed to help homeowners when they have parts of their building that may or may not be legalized? Just wondering how you're kind of dealing with that right now.
Don't really have a proactive approach to remedying, unpermitted construction. If Department of Building, and Robert, correct me if I'm wrong on these things, but if we are contacted either by a property owner, prospective property owner, or building and safety about discrepancies in our records as opposed to the city's records, we will share what we have. But we're not an enforcement agency. We don't opine on whether improvements on a property are legal or illegal. We pretty much assess what is there, what we see. If it's much more an issue of interest to the city, to code enforcement, about ensuring that their construction and building standards are being adhered to. It's not uncommon for a city to take enforcement action against a property owner who has. They may discover that our records show that there's an enclosed porch. Their records don't show that one, and determine that it was unpermitted. They may require that you abate that that problem. It is we don't really have a system where cities compare their data to our data to inventory which properties
Right, it's a one directional, right? You get information from LIDBS, but you're not giving them information basically. That's kind of the one directional. Still. Okay, thanks just for clarifying. Thank you.
I felt it was important, we would be capable of doing that, but it would deviate us from our primary function, which is just determining values for property that leads to property tax revenue.
Thank you, Stephanie. Craig Isaac of Bank of California, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thank you all. And thank you, Robert and Jeff, for taking your time. Two quick questions for you. In regards to your mention, and this may be for you, Jeff, or for you, Robert, I've got a client, and I was wondering if there is, to your point, a deceased. So now you've got family members that are taking over a property. And I know you mentioned that there were the two caveats. One would be some type of improvement to the property, and then the second would be the change of ownership that would trigger the assessment. If there are no improvements and the property is transferred to relatives in the family, would that still trigger the assessment?
Depends on what type of relatives. If it's a child, in some cases a grandchild, it could be excluded from reassessment. If it's a cousin, a brother, a niece, the property would be reassessed.
Got it. And then if it were, and in the circumstance that it is reassessed, is that just for the current tax year, or is it retro to actually the date of passing?
Date of passing. The date of passing, that is when the change in ownership occurs.
Got it. All right. Thank you both very much, Will. Great to see you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Craig. Sivan.
All right. Hello, Will. Mr. Prang, good afternoon. I am a trust attorney, and I have a few questions. A couple of the questions that come up is, as far as Prop 19, when the child needs to live there, and I'm asking these questions in a friendly way. How does your office know that the child actually lives there? I mean, I understand they're going to sign the homestead declaration, but people lie.
There is a great deal of reliance on trust. The homeowner's exemption is the declaration that that is where you live. It is signed under penalty of perjury, so it's a serious document. We're not an enforcement agency. Prop 19 puts us in this very awkward position of trying to find a way to ensure that the people living in the property are the ones who actually live there. We just don't have the ability to be an enforcement agency. So at this point, there's a lot of we have to trust that people aren't lying to us. We do expect a lot of people to lie to us. But if you lie to us and we learn about it and fix the assessment, you could be prosecuted for felony perjury, which comes with jail time and huge fines.
Thank you. I have two more questions. I'll make it quick. Whenever I do a trust, and I know there's an exemption when you transfer it into your own trust, what are, in your opinion, a common mistake you see when people put their properties into a trust that triggers a reassessment?
I'm going to let Robert Izazaki talk a little bit about that, since he spends a lot of his day fixing trust problems. I would say, just anecdotally, probably the biggest challenge with trusts. We all know that they're a valuable tool in helping with estate planning, but so many people believe that a trust is an autopilot, that the property's in a trust and it's hands off from then on, and that's simply not the case. There's still obligations that require the estates and heirs to take certain steps, and I'll let Robert give a little bit more details.
Yeah, the assessor is absolutely right. I would say that the single biggest problem that we have with trusts is not anything with the structure or content of trust, but the fact that we don't receive them when we request them. So you have a couple, they own a piece of property, they have a trust, they want to transfer their property into their trust. So they record the deed, the trust transfer deed. On their PCOR, or preliminary change in ownership report, they indicate that it's a transfer to a revocable living trust. We get that, we see that, oh, this is a special type of transfer, we need to look into it a little bit more. We send out a letter to those property owners saying, oh, can you please provide us with a copy of the trust so that we can confirm that the same people that owned it before the transfer now own it, but just through their trust. A lot of the times people get those letters, they look at it, and they put it in the circular file. They don't send any response, anything like that. So if we don't receive a response, we can't confirm that that is in fact the case, and we go ahead and reassess. When they get that new tax bill, that's when they come and say, oh, please unwind this for us and provide a copy of the trust. But that's the biggest issue. I would say by and large, revocable family trusts, those aren't the ones that we have the biggest issues with. It's more so the situations where there's special needs trusts or irrevocable trusts where children or other family members are the beneficiaries. It takes a little bit more gets involved. Maybe Prop 19 is involved, things like that. But by and large, these kind of standard family trusts don't give us too big of a problem, except for non-responsiveness.
Yeah. I think I've received a few emails from you, Robert, asking for a copy of the trust. So
it's really important. I can't emphasize this enough, that if you get a letter from my office, don't throw it away. If we're asking for things, it's because we need those, and if we don't get them, the chances are that you're going to get a supplemental tax bill.
Right. Sorry. And my last question is, I understand there's a parent-child exclusion. Does that apply the reverse, a child back to parent?
I believe that that's still the case, isn't it, Robert?
Yes.
It was Prop 19, when it was written, I have to admit, was a bit of a dumpster fire. There's tons of problems, and this was one of them, but I think we were able to clarify this one legislatively.
All right. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Will and Anthony.
Thanks, Sivan. We do have one question in the chat. It says, I transferred my rental property into an LLC and was requested to send the operational agreement to the assessor's office. I did send the docs to the assessors with a week delay. Would that cause reassessment? I mean, that's a specific question, but I do know that obviously, especially a lot of investors do tend to, and myself included, do tend to transfer their properties into an LLC. Is that going to cause a reassessment?
I believe it will. Robert?
So the assessor is correct. By default, a transfer that involves a legal entity will result in a reassessment. But fortunately for investors and people who want to protect their property, there is a specific exclusion that's available. It's called the proportional ownership interest transfer exclusion. It's a long title, but basically it's very similar to that trust exclusion that I was talking about before, where if you have an individual, they own a property 100%, they transfer it to their LLC where they're the sole member, the property in that case will not get reassessed. But I'll just share an example of a situation where people think that they're not going to get reassessed based on that exclusion and mix it up with something else. So you have mom and dad, they own a piece of property, they transfer it into their LLC, but they want to have their child as one of the members just because they want to keep it in the family. If the child has even a fraction of a percent membership interest and they didn't own it at all outside the LLC, the property is going to get reassessed 100%. So it's very important that when you're planning these LLC transfers, that you have very specific and precise proportionality before and after. So that's that is kind of not a loophole, but it is a benefit that is provided for under the Revenue and Taxation Code.
Okay. And then there's another question here. It says, does a change in title from 2 people to 1 person because of something like divorce cause reassessment?
In the case of a spouses, divorced spouses typically can transfer property from one another without reassessment. But anybody, the rule of thumb, if it's your spouse or your child, and in some cases your grandchild, you would be excluded from reassessment. Any other relative does not count. Robert, did I miss anything?
No, that's exactly correct.
Okay. Zachary.
Hello to all, and thank you, Anthony, and your team for putting this on. You're all pretty amazing. Thank you, Jeffrey, for showing up and answering our questions. I have a client. I'm a real estate agent here at Sotheby's. I have a client. I sold her a home 27 years ago in the Hollywood Hills. It's a vintage, gorgeous Mediterranean, 1922, 100-year-old home. She hasn't improved it at all in the last 30 years, and it's pretty aged. And she got a tax reassessment. She doesn't even live in it unless she's in America, in LA. She got a tax reassessment this year saying it's worth $2,780,000. And on a sunny day, it's probably worth $1,700,000. So how can I advise her? She wants me to show her comps, and of course the comps are over $2 million up there at the top in the Hollywood Hills, but not for that house. That house is probably going to be torn down by the next owner. Where can I direct her to go?
The Hollywood
Step
Hills.
1 or step 2? I don't know how many steps there are.
Well, I think the first thing you should probably do is speak with an appraiser in our office, from our West District office. That's where the Hollywood Hills properties are situated. I don't have that phone number, but you can call our mainline number and they can get you to somebody. And you want to talk to what they call the appraiser of the day, just whoever's answering the phones that day. And make sure you have the copy of the assessor's parcel number,
APN,
and they can look it up for you. But she's owned the property for a long time, you said?
almost 30 years. I sold it to her.
So what'd you sell it for? A few $100,000?
$720,000.
So its current assessed value is $2 million?
She just got an assessor's bill, an increased assessment bill, and it's like $2.7 million.
Oh,
because those homes sell for that, but not that home. It's 100 years old.
well, the assessment is based on the sale price plus a maximum of 2% increase. I can't do math in my head, but however long she owned it plus 2%, I'm not sure that gets you to $2 million. There's a lot of other taxes on your property tax bill rather than just the property taxes. There's schools and all those other fees as well, that I'm not responsible for.
It's a double lot. It's a double lot, which is pretty prominent there. That's why a developer will probably be the next owner. And it has gone up a couple times. So if you say each assessment increase is maxed at 2%,
Each
This is-
assessment increase is maxed at 2%.
this is multiple times, and
And-
now it's
Yeah, so over the life of the property, although over the last 10 years, it has not always gone up 2%. During COVID, I think we maybe 1% one year and another year just under 1%. But 2% is the maximum.
okay. So she should just call the appraiser at the tax assessor's office.
At the assessor's office, there's no such thing as a tax assessor.
Okay, the assessor's office.
So if you say, this is just a little aside, if you call the county and say you want to talk to the tax assessor, we don't know whether you want the assessor or the tax collector. Usually when they say tax assessor, what they're really saying is tax collector. But a little bit of nomenclature help you navigate the system a little bit easier. But
Okay.
you call the West District office and
Assessor, we've been directed, the west side will call the numbers listed in the chat. They're being forwarded to the
Okay.
Hall of Administration temporarily. So it's in the chat, sir.
213-974-3211.
Yes.
And they should get an appraiser on the line, have them take a look at the property and give you an idea what's been going on with it.
It's in the chat now.
Yes.
Okay, we have one more question, and then I have one final question. There's a question about living trusts. So oftentimes people close in living trusts, and there's a question about, like, if you add a child to the living trust as a trustee, will that cause reassessment?
Robert, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So the average trust, revocable living trust, it has a number of different kind of actors involved in it. There's the trustor, that's usually the parents who establish the trust and own it during their lives. There's the beneficiaries who receive the property when the parents pass away, normally the kids. And then there's the trustee. So the trustee can be either the trustor, basically the trustee is the person who's in charge of the trust administration. So that's usually the parents while they're living, and then the children, usually one or more of them, will become the trustee of the trust after the parents pass away. So that's normally how it's set up. But as far as adding, I guess it depends on who's in what capacity that child is being added on. So if they're being added on as an additional trustor, that may have some effect on the property taxes. If they're being added in as a new beneficiary, so when mom and dad pass away, there's going to be one extra child that's added as the recipient of the trust estate. That may not do anything right away. If they become the trustee, again, they don't own the property in any way. They're just kind of a manager of the trust. That also should not result in a reassessment. So really, it's only if they get added on in a trustor or grantor capacity in some way that I could conceive of there being some sort of repercussion.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one final question, and this was brought up actually once again at the ADU panel earlier today. There is a bill on the desk of the governor right now, SB 1033, regarding the condoization of ADU units. One of the language in the bill would kind of give a lot of leeway to cities and counties in terms of how to administer that. I didn't know, does the assessor's office have a position on this, and whether you support it, and have you guys looked into this, and what do you think would be your position and how you would administrate it?
I don't believe that the assessor's offices or our statewide association have taken a position. I can't remember having any discussions about this. Robert, do you have any recollection of this bill?
No, I don't believe that this particular bill has been a particularly prominent topic of discussion, at least as of yet.
Okay.
If it passes and they allow that those units on residential properties to be condoized, that's a pretty standard procedure for us and how we value them, how we record them. It shouldn't cause us any. It might be a little bit more work if there's a lot of them, but it's nothing out of the ordinary for how we do our business.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Assessor Prang. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Anne Marie. We really appreciate you guys' time. Yes, virtual hands. Thank you so much.
Anytime you need us, we're happy to come back.
Okay, good to know.
Thank
We might
you,
call on
thank
you
you.
again.
Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So we are going to move into the second half of our program. We have someone on the appraisal side, and we on purposely paired the assessor's office with Glenn Kangas, who is a real estate appraiser. And I love his tagline. I know him as the cold-hearted third-party appraiser, whereas most people, like, we all have an idea of what we think are the value of our property is. Glenn obviously specializes in determining that value. And for our purposes as mostly real estate professionals, this is particularly important because the bank believes him. So if the bank believes what Glenn says, we all need to find out exactly how he specifically goes through that process. Another reason I really like working with Glenn, he also has a subspecialty in TIC appraisals, which is something, as we talked about in our office, is something that we do, that we're one of the few brokerages that really has that specialty. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Glenn.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate that. Everybody can hear me okay? I don't have a specific slideshow for you to follow, because I haven't really spoken specifically on TICs very often, but I'll talk about them, and you can ask me questions, and I'll give you my contact info, and we can ask further questions. The one thing I think that the reason I'm the cold-hearted appraiser is, I think it's important to understand the role of the appraiser in the process. We all have a role in the process. So if you're a listing agent, your job is to sell the property for as much money as you can get for your seller. If you're the buyer's agent, your job is to acquire the property but not have them overpay, or at least understand if they overpay, why they had to overpay, because the market was crazy. But the appraiser's job is to be the independent, unbiased party. We're essentially the referee, we're the umpire, and that is our job in the process. And anytime we deviate from that job, we're no longer trusted. So certain personalities kind of fit that appraiser thing a little better than others, perhaps. If you see someone who's a ref in your ASO game for your young child, there's a chance they might be an appraiser. There's actually with a few of us in my region. So I just think that's something really to understand. That's important to understand is, as appraisers, our job is to be independent, and our job is to follow a normal, proven, accepted process for how we value a property, no matter what that type of property is. So on the TIC front in particular, that's a challenge because TICs are fairly new in Los Angeles, in particular. They're much more prevalent in San Francisco. They have not reached that level in Los Angeles. So we're essentially kind of on the cutting edge of developing protocols for TICs, and the lenders don't even always understand them. So I'll kind of gonna go over, number one, what the challenges are, and then I'll talk about my process for appraising a TIC, and then some of the ways we tackle different types of problems. We'll talk about a couple of the newer types of TICs that we're seeing, and then I'll answer any questions. So I will answer, Johnson. TIC is tenant in common. In real estate, when you're learning real estate in whatever whatever part of real estate you enter, traditional tenant in common is four of you. You don't have enough money to buy that $1.2 million 4-unit property. Although that might even be low now for a 4-unit property. But each of you can muster 300 grand. So you go, four of you, and you do a tenant in common agreement. You buy the one property, but you're on one loan, one title, one thing, and you have a separate agreement that tells how you guys divvy up the money, the responsibilities, the profit, etc. The tenant in common we're seeing now in Los Angeles that's coming from San Francisco is actually a fractional interest tenant in common, in which people take and buy a 4-unit property, they convert it to tenant in common, and then they're able to sell each individual unit. They can get title for the unit, and they can get a loan, a separate loan for that unit. And that's what's new about it, is that you can now get an individual loan or title, and you don't necessarily have to know the people you're in partnership with. You can just buy your one piece and sell your one piece, and it's much more portable than a normal, old style tenant in common. So in Southern California, that started as somebody would buy a 3-unit or a 4-unit in a fairly expensive area, convert it to tenant in common, and then sell each individual unit. As an investor, for your investors, it's actually worth more individually than it is collectively. It is like a condo, but it's a much faster process. Will is actually the expert on that part. I am not an expert on that part. I'm the expert on valuing them. But the whole point of it is to, increase your profit in the building by doing that. It's also a much faster process than condos.
Sorry to interrupt, Glenn. I will just say there's a big difference between a TIC and a condo, which is when you have a condo, you have your own APN, you have your own parcel, and you have your own property tax. And there's a process for lending and all those various things on the condo side. TIC is very different. A tenant in common agreement is a private agreement amongst the owners to own the property together, with everybody having a certain basis within that property. So there's one property tax bill. But
then it sounded like Glenn said you can somehow, I'm not going to use the right terms, but sort of subdivide it more. So you said something changed, Glenn. There was something, right? Yeah, what was that?
It was the fractional ownership.
Ownership.
So the idea would be, Stephanie, if you, me, and Glenn owned a triplex together, and we each agreed that we would each have a unit, and that just for ease, each of us own 33%, right? Sure. And we each put in $500,000, and it's worth 1.5 initially. But then later on, whatever, I decide to move out and I sell mine at a different basis at like 750, then someone else could buy my portion. And you would then have a different TIC owner.
Got it, but it's still percentages of the one property, 33% at whatever. Okay, got it. Sorry, thank you for that. Thank you so much for that clarification. Yeah.
Right, and on that front too, and previously there was one loan, so you'd have to go find a cash buyer to do it, whereas now you can actually get individual loans for individual portions. But that's just kind of an overview. It's much deeper than that, and you definitely want to talk to Will about the details of how it works and all of that type of thing. So the benefit is it's essentially started out to be an affordable housing option for people. And really the intent was to start out for investors. You could buy your little TIC unit and rent it out and start your real estate empire, one little piece at a time. But we're seeing people are actually living in them just because prices have gotten so crazy. So, but just in the terms of how we value them, there's a multiple challenges. Number one, the challenge in selling them is not enough people know what they are. So you spend a lot of time educating, and we have the same process with educating lenders. So the first thing you deal with is there's not a lot of TICs. So when you're trying to value something, the more of them they are, the easier it is to appraise, because you compare it to another similar unit, and it's just a lot easier. So that's the first problem. The second problem is the MLS still does not have a separate search term for that or classification that is used on a regular basis. So it's very hard to find TIC sales just by doing a random search if you don't know what to look for. And then the third thing is we're getting into a pretty wide range of styles of TIC properties. The initial ones all started out as, the most common was a 4-unit or 3-unit property in like Silver Lake Echo Park, someplace like that. But now we've seen 7-unit bungalows, 12-unit apartment buildings. We've got brand new ones, and we're actually now seeing ADU TICs as well. So in each one is responded to differently by the market. And our job as the appraiser is to determine what's the market doing in terms of them, to determine how much they are to the market, not to one buyer, but to the market. So the first thing that we always want to do is obviously compare it to other TICs, and especially other similar style TICs. The one thing that's been helpful so far is the majority of TICs are in much older buildings than the condos, and they're classified mostly as condos in MLS. But if you look in the condos and you see stuff built in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, those are very unlikely TICs. The TICs are actually probably built in the 20s or 30s. There's a few mid-century ones as well. So that's one way to kind of see that it might be that when you're trying to do a search. The thing that I did for a while, because there were so few agents who did them, I would actually just run a search for that agent's ID in MLS and just grab everything from them to do that. I clearly have a database now because I've been doing TIC appraisals since 2018. So I actually have a database of them myself, which is helpful to me. But still, we get some new ones that that I don't always know about. So that, let's see, what was the search? So yeah, first we start with similar TICs. And then the thing they're most similar to is condos. When a TIC first sells in a market area or a neighborhood, they typically sell for anywhere from 10 to 15% less than a similar size condo, just because of nobody knows what they are, and at the moment there's only a few lenders, so financing is a little bit more challenging, although there is financing available. But mostly it's just the lack of understanding of them. And then once you see sales in an area and then another project pops up and another project pops up, you actually see the prices close to be more similar to the condos. And personally, I feel that's not because of the ownership, even necessarily than just the understanding of the ownership. I think it's because the buildings that they're doing are way cooler than the condos that you see. The condos are just these horrible 70s and 80s and 90s buildings, instead of a unit that's in a 1924 Spanish with arch ceilings and all that kind of stuff. So I think that comes into play quite a bit. So that's the first option you look for. But if you have a detached bungalow style TIC, and there's a handful of those around that are really nice, those are actually more similar. They're superior to a condo, but not quite as good as a small lot single family. So you end up, in our appraisal, we end up having a condo and a small lot single family, and we do analysis of, they're 20% inferior to one and 15% superior to the other, whatever the numbers work out. So it becomes quite a challenge. And now there's also brand new TICs that are townhome style, and there's also brand new that are like small lot subdivisions, and there's some ADU style, ADU actually TICs. So we always want to compare it to the most similar of that type of TIC and what the market buyer is doing it. So I interview, the sellers of TICs a lot. I'm like, hey, what are your buyers looking for when they picked that TIC versus a different style TIC? So the other thing that we really do a lot is we use older sales of TICs. So an area might have had some TICs done in 2020, 2021, early 2022, but then there hasn't been anything there for a while. So we'll go back in time and grab those comps of a similar TIC, and then we'll market trend of what's the market done since then. So our report is they're not pretty. They're quite the compilation of here's a recent condo, here's an old dated TIC, here's a small lot home, here, you know, and they all kind of reconcile to a range of values that we consider reasonable. Some of the lenders are a little more critical, a little more, they're just more afraid. So they ask a lot more questions. And then some lenders don't ask a lot of questions on that type of thing. But the pricing just becomes a challenge, and even proving it becomes quite a challenge. And different agents have had different methods of selling TICs. Some, the most prevalent one lists them lower than they think, and then they end up being bid up, which creates a separate problem on the appraisal side. But there isn't necessarily one method that's always the best. Although in the current market, because of the interest rates being where they're at, I always encourage people to price things as accurately as possible, as they think, to just because the market's not the same as it was. So, and then the other two things that we'll do is we'll go find TICs farther away that sold. So we'll expand our distance parameters much farther than we would for a single family or condo appraisal. And then we have to compare neighborhoods. So we do some group data analysis of, hey, what does that neighborhood sell for versus our neighborhood for similar product? So we do a lot of that. And then the other thing we can do is, how did the TICs in an adjacent neighborhood sell relative to a condo or a small lot? And then compare, use that adjustment in our neighborhood. So there's definitely a lot of creativity that we have to get into in appraising when we're doing these. And anytime you have any local knowledge about something, it's definitely better. We're doing a lot of pre-listing and or private TIC appraisals just to help people understand ahead of time what it would be. And that you might want to take advantage of something like that. And if you have a TIC situation, I also recommend pairing up with somebody who's done TICs and sharing the commissions with them if you have a TIC project. So that's just the basics of what we do for TICs and how they're different than, single family. We don't necessarily follow the 6 months, 1 mile kind of thing. We expand our parameters quite a bit, but we still have to prove to the lender that value makes sense in the current market with the limited data. What questions have we had that I have not seen as I was rambling on?
Yeah, if you have any questions for Glenn, please go ahead and raise your virtual hand. I think most of the questions have been just about, various TICs and lending and stuff like that. Let's see.
Yeah, when one defaults on a loan, the lender can foreclose on it. But when there's somebody doesn't pay their portion of the property tax, there's actually the TIC agreement certainly allows for the other members of the agreement to take care of it. And there's a specific process that's followed to protect the interest of the other tenant in common members. The one thing that I did find out, because an attorney asked me, an estate planning attorney, was a litigator, was like asking about partition, like, oh, you can just partition and force them to sell. TIC agreements all have partitioning is not allowed in a tenant common agreement. So it cannot be forced in the majority of them.
In a fractional
interest tenant common. Yeah.
Exactly. Correct. In a typical tenant in common agreement, it is.
Yes.
It is absolutely. That's part of being in a tenant in common with just regular partners. So
yeah.
Do we have any other questions for Glenn? And it doesn't have to be about TICs. It could just be
about talk about other appraisal craziness.
Yeah.
Right now.
I think there's a question early on about I think Johnson asked, why do most appraisals come in at purchase price?
appraisals come in at purchase price because if they don't, the shit hits the fan. So if I had my way, the lenders basically say if it's not at purchase price or higher, they're not doing the deal at that price. So if it's in escrow for $1 million and I think it's worth 980, there's really no disagreement. 980 and $1 million are still roughly the same. There's not one number, right? There isn't that number. But the lenders, it's one number. If it's in escrow to $1 million, it's got to be $1 million or higher. So me personally, if I miss big, right? If it's close to $1 million, I'm going to come in at $1 million. But if it's only worth 950, it's only worth 950 and nowhere near $1 million. I'm not going to come in anywhere near it because I want to make it clear. Clearly, it's not worth $1 million. I come in sometimes above contract price. But nobody cares, right? Nobody says a word if you come in at $1.010 million, but if you come in at 998, everybody freaks out. So even the lender, Fannie Mae, they tell us all the time, oh, you guys, you anchor to the sales price. And it's like, well, because you make us. Because if they had the loan based on, okay, if the buyer has an 800 FICO score and this much money in the bank, then we'll allow a variance of some percentage from the opinion of value. Or if the opinion of value by the appraiser is within 1% of the contract price, and everything else looks good, we're all good to go. We'll do it. They won't do it that way. They loan based on the exact number that the contract price is at, and no less. So that's why appraisers come in at contract. If the contract price is within the adjusted range in an appraisal, the majority of appraisers just come in at that, and then everything is good. The real problem with that is if you don't confirm the contract price with the appraiser, and there's a counter offer that's different than the appraiser thought, then we run into trouble. So of course, I always tell agents when I talk with them, always confirm the contract price with the appraiser so that they know that they're not missing something. The banks are horrible about sending along the counter offer that increased the sale price $75,000, or a year and a half ago, $175,000 or $200,000. And you think, oh, it's worth a little more, but I'm going to come in at the contract price, and you actually would have been okay. So, but it's just because the banks and Fannie Mae anchor to the sales price on what loan amount they'll base the loan on.
Okay. Are there any other questions? There was a question, do you mind repeating how you find comps for TICs? I mean, I think you said it. You said you look obviously at other TICs, you look at condos, you may look at TICs that are a little further out. I think that the bigger question is like, say it's a freestanding TIC, right? It's an ADU, like
Right.
you said. Does that matter to you? Like, if it's more almost like a single family house.
Well, the market clearly prefers a detached independent unit over an attached unit, period, whether you're talking about condos or anything else. Right? A detached condo sells for more than an attached condo. The small lot with 6 inches in between sell for more than a townhouse where they're attached and have CC&Rs. That it's still, all of that still applies. The ADUs are interesting because there was one ADU that sold that had been a garage way back in the day and then a rec room. That's the first one that sold in the Glassell Park, and it sold for $450 or some pretty low number, but it was a pretty small unit. There's another one I think that sold a brand new ADU in Silver Lake on Briar that I think went for almost $1.1 million, but it was a garage that was expanded and added onto the second floor to make a 2-story ADU. And then there's another brand new ADU that I was actually just talking to a listing agent about today in 90016. They just built it in the back. So the 4-unit building, they sold all the TICs, but they built a brand new ADU in the back. And now that's on the market. And they're trying to figure out what to price that at because they're selling an ADU as a TIC unit. So, yeah, everything is different and challenging. And when it's the first one of its kind, it's harder than it is if there's been at least some activity. And there's a lot more new construction TICs too. It's the TIC process is way faster than the condo process. So even Thomas James builders, they've built a handful of 2-unit TICs because the condo process was taking too long.
Yeah, that really is a major advantage of a TIC over a condo, is just that the process, if you don't zone it up front, if you don't map it up front as a condo, the process of rezoning is very arduous. Can take a lot of time. There's parking requirements, there's public hearing requirements, stuff like that. Whereas, a TIC is a private agreement with the owners. So any property pretty much can be a TIC. So it just has to be an agreement that the owners all agree to. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an agent, that again, Will could probably tell you more benefits than I can, but what I see just, since I'm in the field, is the benefits to the individual owner or seller are they're going to net more money on the back end by converting it because they're worth more individually than they are assembled. And one of the best things I even saw, somebody turn their 2-unit property into a TIC. They're still living in the front unit and they sold the back unit. So they walked away with $550,000 now, and they still own their front unit TIC. So they were able to, now they don't even have to manage that. Somebody else owns it, but they got the cash.
Right.
And on like
and they're paying half the property tax.
Right. Yeah. And they're splitting the property tax. Yeah.
On top of
and then
it.
on a 12-unit building, you could actually buy it, convert it to a TIC, and then do it one at a time. And if you got a couple of tenants that are existing, you can still rent to those tenants. So you don't have to do everything at once. You can convert one unit, sell it, get some cash to do the next one. And so if you don't have a time constraint, it gives you flexibility on a deal. I think it would at some point be an opportunity to maybe get around the mansion tax for some of those apartment buildings that would sell for more than $5 million if you sold them one at a time. But I don't know. You probably need to check with some attorneys and other people on that.
That's a question for our assessor.
Even the assessor, he doesn't care about the mansion tax.
He doesn't care about the mansion tax. Stephanie, you had a question. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. I have two. And one is, and Will, this is really for you, just about TIC, so we could come back to it, as I know Glenn's time is so valuable. But I'll ask that one first. Just what do you do with how do you handle the shared area? So curious about that. That's, I'm sure, a whole other TIC presentation. That was my first question, how that gets handled. And then number two, really, Glenn, for you, how do you look at future construction loans? So leaving the TIC for a second, when people are doing an addition, an ADU, and really getting those 2 or 3K loans or other types of loans where they are, like we get involved with, where they are designing something and that's what you're assessing in order to allow them to get a certain amount of money. How do you look at those differently than you're looking at buildings that are already there? If you could share about that.
Yeah, those are just we call them an ARV, as repaired value appraisals. So depending on the lender, I have a couple lenders I do that type of work for. Some of them only ask for the as repaired value. Some of them will ask for an as is value. And then the as repaired value is whatever the plans are. So it could be anything from a remodel without adding on, or it could be one of the clients that I do work for, the flipper typically expands the property dramatically and will maybe even add an ADU or something like that. So then we compare it to stuff once it's complete. That's what we compare it to for the as repaired value in that report.
Right, but how are you doing that? Obviously, the nuance of a built thing versus some drawings of it. What is that? How does that come through in your process?
Specs.
How do you do that? Yeah,
we get the specs and the plans. So then we make them clarify how many square feet are you adding, we need the detailed budget of what they're doing, the detailed plans to verify the square footage of what's going to be there. And if they're going to add a garage or an ADU or whatever it is, we need that spelled out because it's in our scope of work and assignment conditions. We have to spell out what we're appraising. And so we need the details of that. And we include that in the report. So subject
Right. So like, I
to,
guess as architects, maybe my sub question is, how can we show you, what can we do that
right.
helps you maybe greater assess something? What are you really
The
looking
best thing
for
is a set of
specifically
plans
in
that
those
clearly
plans? Yeah.
identifies the square footage,
Yeah.
a detailed budget, and in particular, the type of finished materials that you're going to use, because a lot of them end up doing a quality upgrade when they do that. So knowing what materials you're going to use and what your budget is, your true cost, that's got a pretty good breakdown, and specifically what's your final square footage, when you're done. So we know that if you're just remodeling versus adding on or whatever. And if you're taking it down to the studs, it's important to know that. We view that as what's called C condition 2, which is like brand new, but not quite. So, and that's, you tear it down to the studs and start from scratch almost. That's C2. So yeah, the more information we get, the better, the more accurate we can be on that front.
Okay, thank
Great
you, Glenn.
question.
Are there any other questions for Glenn while we have him here? Oh, let me go back and answer your first question, Stephanie. So with regards to common areas and TICs and shared responsibilities, for instance, the biggest one being property tax, but it can often be water, could be sewer, could be trash, could be gardening, could be repairs, right? Roof repairs or any of those issues. Usually that is part of the agreement. And usually there's an HOA fee that's assessed monthly, just like you would for a condo for any common area repairs. So so usually you have someone budget those things out ahead of time, including the property tax, right? So that people contribute to it monthly. And that's often where TICs can fall short, so if they're not enforcing that regular collection and whatnot, that could be an issue for you down the line as a community, so that's why it's important to
Right.
put
Because
together
it can probably be a little more on the onus of those individual people, which feels
correct.
a little less, whatever, serious
Right.
or something than the typical.
And you are
condo
starting to see some
HOA.
property management companies who are typically do HOAs. They will do some of these TIC properties. It just depends. Some owners obviously decide they don't want to hire an outside person. They just do it themselves. It all just depends on, I think, one lawyer I spoke with says that he sees that there's more issues with smaller TICs than there are with larger number of TICs, because usually larger number of TICs, there's more units, there's more professionalization.
Right.
Sometimes they get an outside team to come in, but if it's just two owners, they're like, oh, we'll figure it out, we'll do that, and then somebody doesn't pay, and then it can become an issue. So, are there any other questions? Well, if not, Glenn, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and if you want to put your information in the chat so people can reach out to you, we obviously have a lot of real estate professionals here who often need appraisal services, especially as we talked about with the assessor. You have a client who maybe family member passed away. I get these requests all the time. We need an appraiser. We need someone with appraised value for a building, that somebody owned. Definitely reach out to Glenn. He will give a great, he'll work with you. So
yeah, I do a lot of data death, estate, not a lot of non-lender stuff. I actually do a higher percentage of non-lender than I do lender work.
There we go.
To help people in those situations. And actually the question that somebody asked with that property where they thought that it was assessed too high in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, you can talk to if you can't get it resolved with the assessor, then that would be a good thing to hire a private appraiser, because the situation that's causing them trouble is the condition of the property. And I can't imagine it would have been too high because there's been no new transfer, but I did a private one for somebody that they bought it with their cousin. They were in the middle of remodeling, so it was gutted. and then they were going to buy the cousin out, which was going to trigger a reassessment, which then the reassessment, they'll have no clue that it's missing the whole interior. So we did an appraisal just up front to prepare for that, so that they could fight that reassessment and like, look at the inside, you know. So those are the few times in LA County where you could hire a private appraiser. Most of the time you don't. Most of the time you can go to the county and they'll figure it out. But
Right.
yeah.
And this is why we paired you with the assessor, because
Yeah.
we knew that these types of situations do
Yeah.
occur.
The assessor's
Yeah.
great about coming out and into the community. He's really, really good about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure Anthony's still here. I think, he is at the Reimagine conference at the California Association of Realtors in Anaheim.
Right.
So he may have jumped off. But I want to thank Glenn for your time.
My pleasure.
And thank all of you for showing up and taking the time to learn about real estate investing, and multifamily investing. And, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Again, I'm Will Tiao. I'm the director of the commercial division here at the Collective Realty. And feel free to reach out to us with any questions. All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.